Our first female Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, has carved out quite the career for herself as a feminist champion, since she was ousted from office. A lot of it stems from this speech.
I say to the Leader of the Opposition, I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. And the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever.
Gone are the memories of her low polling, her poor leadership, and the backstabbing between her and the Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd. It's all about the speech.
For a period, it was all everybody was talking about in terms of my time in office, but I'm well and truly at peace with it now, because most leaders don't get remembered for very much, is the truth of it. They certainly don't get internationally recognised for very much. Not much of the world is that interested in Australian politics. And so now, as I spend quite a bit of my life overseas and I have people talk to me about that speech, and it's sort of the only thing they know about Australian politics. Sometimes it's almost the only thing they know about Australia, otherwise, you know, kangaroos, koalas, that speech. I think, well, you know, that's a pretty good place to be.
So this has just been released by the ABC on Julia Gillard, and yet the media is constantly bullying former Prime Minister Scott Morrison, what with articles such as this. The question isn't when Scott Morrison will quit politics, it's why he hasn't already. That today on the Sydney Morning Herald website, leading the website. Then there was this in The Australian, Scott Morrison's PwC job blow after talent agent rebuffed. That in The Australian this week, an entire hit job on Scott Morrison. So who gets to decide how we remember our former Prime Ministers? Joining me now is Teena McQueen, Vice President of the New South Wales Liberal Party. Teena, so good to have you here.
Hi, Sharri, love to see you.
Look, you can't even begin to compare the treatment of Scott Morrison and Julia Gillard.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, Julia Gillard's been very, very smart. She used that speech, which wasn't actually for Tony Abbott. I think it was to stave off more Bill Shorten. And it's speech out of the blue, because her and Tony Abbott had a great respect for each other, worked well together, so it really was out of the blue. But she's carved a career out for herself and totally reinvented herself. She's kept quiet on all subjects. As I said, she's been very smart and she's exited with grace and dignity. So hats off to her, but she has rewritten history.
It's quite similar to Julie Bishop. Both of them refused to come out as feminist icons during their time in politics. This was very frustrating, I think, to many female journalists in the press gallery. They didn't want to talk about the issue. But now, and in fact, Julie Bishop insisted she wasn't a feminist.
Many times.
Famously insisted
Many
that.
times.
It's very frustrating. Yet now, in their post-politics careers, they've redefined themselves.
Well, everything's about shaping their role when they're in government, you know, particular. So, yeah, they're very careful, Sharri. They're not terribly brave women.
And so why do you think the media is bullying Scott Morrison so much? There has been a concerted campaign here over the past year and during his time as Prime Minister.
It really has been awful. I mean, I think he's been hard done by. I think the difference with Julia Gillard, she had the base support behind her. Unfortunately, Scott Morrison lost a lot of that base support. I think the media sense that, and they know when you haven't got your troops behind you, you're free to whack. And I think that's part of Scott Morrison's problem. But no one should comment on when he's leave. It's his choice when to leave. I mean, clearly he's a relatively young man and wants to make sure he's got another career ahead of him outside of Parliament. So he's going to take his time on this. I think he wanted to hang around hoping that Biden would come out, for, you know, because his role in AUKUS. So I think all that is disappointing. He's hung around for different events that haven't happened. So it's probably
the Liberals don't have many politicians in federal Parliament at all. You think they'd be wanting to hang on to someone who has that experience as well. You know,
that's right. And Labor honours all their previous leaders. You know, they rewrite the history books with their leaders. We don't. That's something we don't do well at all. You know, we tend to can our previous leaders, and we shouldn't do that.
Well, and how do you think that Tony Abbott is remembered as well? Do you think he suffers the same sort of treatment from the media?
I think he's always been hammered by the media, but Tony, he's a man of conviction. He doesn't care, you know, and he's relatively remains silent unless something like The Voice, where he feels passionate about. He's not scared to come out and really throw his weight about something he feels very passionately about. And I think he still has strong support in the base, Tony Abbott, oddly enough. The more they hammer him, the more the base will get behind him, you know. So
I think often, though, that the base, as you call it, or the, you know, the rusted-on Liberal or Labor supporters on both sides of politics, they respond to media coverage as well. So You know, Scott Morrison was never this deeply hated figure. He wouldn't have come through the middle between Turnbull and Dutton to be elected Prime Minister if he was. It was Dutton who was so divisive at the time. But during his Prime Ministership, you know, the media really turned on him. There was the Me Too movement. He was blamed for anything that went wrong. And that then...
And then on the other end of it, with his climate change policies, he really upset what I refer to as the base of the party. So he was getting whacked from both ends. But, you know, he's a decent guy, a former Prime Minister, should be respected. And I think they should lay off him a little bit. You know, he's got two lovely daughters, a wife. Let him have a bit of peace. You know, he worked very hard for our country. Let him enjoy his last few years in Parliament.
But, I mean, he would still presumably be working hard, and the media's trying to kick him out of Parliament early when he does have a lot to offer. I mean, there's a lot of untalented, lazy backbenchers around there that you think should leave their position on both sides. Who you think should leave their positions first. Look,
but he won with a very big margin. People forget that. I think he got 65% of the vote.
In Cook, you mean?
Yeah.
In his seat.
So clearly he's loved in Cook. So
I think one interesting former Prime Minister to look at is John Howard, because he obviously did lose his seat of Bennelong when he also lost the election. But in the past, what's it been, 16 years, 16 I think since he lost the job as Prime Minister, he has definitely, he's become more of a beloved figure. He's improved over that time.
He has. And again, people forgot he lost his seat. You know, they just see him as this grand gentleman of the party with a lot of wisdom to impose on others, and has great respect, John Howard. But yeah, it is forgotten that he did lose his seat in a bad way.
Yeah. All right. Teena McQueen, so great to have you with us. Thank you for your
Sharri.
thoughts.
Congratulations again on being vindicated of all of your hard work.
Thank you very much, Teena.